I'm here today to do lesson 10. This is all about functions and moderately advanced functions. So we'll spend a good chunk of our time on the formulas ribbon, but you know you can get to the function dialog box also on the formula bar, and you really could get through the home tab as well if you had to through AutoSum. So today in this lesson, we're going to talk about the sum if functions, the count if functions, and the average if functions. The takeaway here is that these are all ifs and they will have multiple arguments. So starting with you have some if and some ifs. So the difference between any of these when you see an S on the end is that it can have multiple criteria. So I could total one set of columns based on this criteria and another set of columns based on another set of criteria with a ifs in any of these. So we'll look, of course, at all of these. So by definition, the sum if adds the cells in a range, and that is going to be based on criteria. And then a sum ifs is going to add cells in a range again, but multiple sets of criteria. Sometimes you can even have the same range that you're totaling. It's just based on different criteria, and I'll show that to you as well. The next function we're going to look at is the count if and ifs. It's going to count the number of cells that meet the criteria or multiple criteria. And then average if is going to find the mean, the average, based on the criteria or multiple criteria that you are looking for. So conditional formulas, that's what these are, because they are ifs and you are going to be looking for something based on criteria or conditions. So conditional formulas add another dimension to data analysis by summarizing data that meets one or more criteria. So one would be if and more than one would be ifs. Criteria can be number, text, expression that tests which cells it's going to sum, count, or average in this case. A conditional formula is one in which is determined by the presence or absence of a particular condition. So essentially what this is saying is that if part again, if it meets it, it shows it. If it doesn't show it or doesn't add it to it or use it in the function. Conditional formulas used in Excel include sum if, count if, average if, and then of course the plural version. All right, so we're going to start with a sum if. A sum if function calculates the total of only those cells that meet a given criteria or condition. The syntax is going to be, and syntax is just structure, is going to be sum if, the range that we are looking for, the criteria that we are looking for, and the range that we are adding up. And you're going to see that sometimes range and sum range can be the same thing. The values that a function uses to perform operations in a calculation are called arguments. Okay, we separate our arguments with a comma symbol, or it's a different line in the argument box, and I'll show you all of this as well. The arguments for the sum if are range, criteria, and sum range. So by definition, it is an easier one. Cells within the range do not meet the criteria are not included in the total. If you use the numbers in the range for the sum range argument is not required. So that's why I said sometimes it's range and sum range being the same thing. If you are, and there's no problem with putting it in there twice, if it is the same range, it's not going to affect it in any way, shape, or form. It says if you are using the criteria to test which values to sum for a different column, then the range becomes the tested value, and the sum range determines which number to total in the same rows as the matching criteria. Okay, so here is the definition of each one of our arguments. A range is the range that the cells that you want the functions to evaluate. Also adds the match cells in the sum range is blank. Criteria is the condition or criterion, and is essentially that you are looking for. It can be a number, expression, or text. And then the sum range, it will add the corresponding values based on the criteria that you are looking for. So we are going to use 10 Fabricam sales. So I'm going to go on over and grab that from my stuff. I'm going to download. So SumIF isn't too bad. I know these are all new and they all look kind of bad, but it's once you get the hang of them, it's not too terribly bad. So here we have Fabricam, and we see their December property sales and the agent that sold them, the list price, the sales price, the difference in between, and then there's going to be a percentage difference in how many days it was on the market. So over here essentially is all the functions that we are going to do, and we'll tie it back over here. So we'll see it in this neat little summary box over here. So in the real world, if I wanted all of these answers to be determined, I would look at this and I would be able to figure it out. Now, I do have step-by-steps that will help us walk through and figure this out as well. So we are trying to, in this very first one, we are trying to figure out the sum of the sales over 200,000. So we are going to be looking for, essentially, sales that we achieved that were over $200,000. If they're not over 200,000, we don't add them to it. So essentially, you are going through and saying, okay, this one's over 200,000, grab it. This one isn't, dismiss it. This one is, add it to the other one, so on and so forth. And Excel it's like a hunt and seek or a find and seek, if you will. And Excel will go and find all that. So on the formulas ribbon is where we go, and there's a lot of ways we can do. We can do insert function. I told you you could ultimately do auto sum and come down here to more function. And of course, you have all the libraries that contain your function as well. So we're going to start with the libraries, and this is in the Math and Trig library. And if you scroll down, thank you, it is in alphabetical order. We see sum, SumIf, and SumIfs. We're going to do SumIf, and here's our dialog box with our arguments. So each one of these will be an argument: range, criteria, and sum range. Essentially what Excel is going to do to separate the ranges is going to put commas in between it. So a comma is going to end the argument. So you'll have the syntax, which is equals SumIf, left parenthesis. Then you have your arguments, and then it'll end, of course, in a right parenthesis. So we are, and I'm just going to move this kind of over here so I can see what's happening and remind myself what I'm looking for. I could collapse this if I wanted to, like so, but I just move it out of the way. So our first thing is the range, okay? What are we looking for? Okay, I like to, and you'll see in the SumIfs, I try to remind myself sum is the one I'm trying to do the math for when I'm trying to differentiate the two here. I don't need to in this case, but when I do, I try to keep in the back of my head, sum is the one that is, sum means numbers and totals and math, and you total with numbers and math. So with the sum, if a lot of the times, though, the range and the sum range are the same thing. So we are looking at sum of sales over 200,000. So if I go and I look, I have agent, list price, sales, difference, blah, 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 blah. So here's my sales. So all my sales are in C5 to C16. Do not include 17 because that's a total. Then you have to say to yourself, do I need to lock this in? Well, no, I don't, because it's the only time I'm going to use it. If for some reason I was going to fill this, a lot of the times you do have to lock these in because you always want it to be this range. You wouldn't want the range in the next one to be C6 to C17, for example. All right, so now the question becomes, what am I looking for? I'm looking for sales over 200,000. So this is my sales. This is the criteria, what I'm looking for. So don't mess up your greater than and less than symbols. Do your hands if you have to. Left hand is an L. If you tip it to the left, that's the less than symbol, or tip it towards your right, it's the less than symbol. So I'm going to put a less than symbol, or excuse me, I'm going to put a greater than symbol in, and I'm going to type in 200,000. Okay, and you don't need any symbols in here when you're doing it, no commas, no dollar signs. You are just typing in the symbol for greater than and then the numbers that you are using. Okay, so greater than 200,000, and then we could be done. okay, we could not, we don't have to put in the sum range because our sum range is our range. But if we did, it will require us to just select this, but it's the same. And see, let me show you something real quick. So down here, this is your answer. This is the answer that you're going to see in the cell. Okay. Over here, it's kind of telling you what's being used and selected. If you ever see red over here, like if I came over here, hopefully I don't mess this up, and I did this, invalid, red, something's wrong. Before you press OK, you know something is wrong. So the other thing, if you notice, range. If I come down here, it gives me a hint. Range is the range of cells that you want evaluated. Criteria is the condition or criteria in the form of a number expression or that defines the cell that will be added. Sum range are the actual cells to be summed. If omitted, the cells in the range are used. So essentially what that is saying is if you don't put anything here, it's just going to use this, which is the truth in this one. So you could do this or you could not, and our answer still stays the same, the 1,657,100. Press OK, and I have a value. If you ever see pound ref, pound value, pound anything, besides a straight line of hashtags, you know something is wrong. So when something is wrong, if I just come up here and I press FX, it takes me straight back to that dialog box. All right. So the next one tells us to sum of the properties that sold for a percentage difference less than 3%. Okay, so now we're looking for the sum of the properties that sold for the percentage less than 3%. So this is still just a sum if. Okay, we are just looking for our we are just looking for the percentages that are less than 3%, but that's not what we're totaling. So this is going to be the slight difference between the last one and this one, because we're going to be summing the properties, excuse me, that sold, but it's going to be based on the information over here. Still just a sum if with that range. So I'm going to click on FX this time. I'm going to show you can type in sum if. And I can press go. Sometimes close enough doesn't work, so if you don't have it spelled right, you might not get any results back. So just be careful of that. So I am going to click on sum if, and I'm going to press OK. So I'll move this down here so you can kind of see. So we are looking for the sum of the properties that sold for a percentage different less than 3%. So what am I looking for? I'm looking for this right here, okay? E5 to E16. And again, I say to myself, do I need to lock it in? No, I'm not going to fill this down, okay? So it doesn't have to be locked in. And it's not going to do anything if you do lock it in. So here's me locking it in for you. Okay. So what am I looking for in this range for it to be totaled up? I am looking for the difference of less than 3%. So I'm going to click in here and I am going to do less than, and I am going to type a 3 in. Okay. Now these are formatted, okay, as percentages. So I do have to put that percent symbol in there to get the answer. If you do it and you don't get the right answer, okay, you can always come back, okay, and that's because the right parenthesis was in there, so it was saying it was invalid because of that. So there was a difference between the answers. So if it's ever not the answer you're supposed to get, there's a possibility that that you just needed the percent sign because that's how it's formatted. If this wasn't percent set as a percentage, then you would type it in differently. So Then the sum range. This is where the difference is between this one and the last one. So the sum range is what we're trying to total. We're looking for percentage difference less than 3%, but I'm gonna, once I find a percentage difference less than 3%, I'm gonna total it up. So based on the sales. So that is where this range comes in. And again, I could lock it in and it's not gonna affect anything. So I am looking for, okay, the differences. And then once I find the differences less than 3%, I come over here and I will add them up. So if I look, this one wouldn't be included, this one wouldn't be included, this one wouldn't. The first one would be Nicole Carson, excuse me, oops. And hers would be the first one that we would add to it, okay? And moving down, this one would not, this one would, this one would, this one would. And that's essentially what Excel is doing, is once it finds the ones that are less than 3% here, it comes over here and takes this number and adds to them to get a total, to get a sum. And we should have 1,134,200, and that's what we have. And we press OK. So the difference between these two essentially is that sum range. And this one, we were summing the same thing that we were looking for. This one, we were looking for something different than we were looking to sum. So you just have to break it down. You just have to get practice at it. There's no great way about it. Of course, you know, when you're out there in the real world, you are researching and you are looking things up and you are, you know, trying to make it work the best that you can. So you could just get used to it. Okay, so we're going to move on now to a sum ifs, okay? And our sum ifs function is going to add cells that meet multiple criteria. So if the sum range is the first argument, and then you go from there based on your criteria. So I'll show you the difference in what they're saying here in just a second with the argument box. Okay, so we are still on the same workbook. And we are going to come over here to H7, and it says sum the properties listed 60 days or less valued at more than 200,000. Okay, so I'm going to click in here, and again, I could, I'm going to click on Insert FX this time, and this time I'm going to type in sum ifs, and it comes up. All right, so what they're saying in the PowerPoint is sum range is first in this one. Okay, so if you remember in this one, okay, sum range was last. It flips, okay, because essentially, no matter what you're doing with the sum ifs, oops, I do not want to type it in. No matter what you're doing with the sum ifs, it's the same range that you're totaling. So that's why it starts with the total range. Maybe when they structured these, they should have done it the same for both of them. I don't know. Okay, so essentially you are now saying, what am I trying to total? It says sum of the properties sold within 60 days sum of the properties listed 60 days or less at more than 200,000. Okay, so I'm still summing that same range. Okay, I'm still summing based on sales price. Again, do I have to fill it? No, I don't have to, so I don't have to lock it in. I'm still summing the same range. And here, as I start to click down here, you're going to see more of these pop up based on how much criteria I'm looking to put in. I can put more than 2 in. I'm just going to only put 2 in this time. All right, so how do I remember this? Range. Range is a range of cell. So that means this would be your cell range that you're looking for. Criteria is the criteria that you type in yourself that you are looking for. So I am looking for, in the first part, it tells me to look for the ones that were on the market 60 or less days. Okay. So what has the market of 60 or less days? F does. So F5 to F16 is my range. Okay. Then what's my criteria? I am looking to see if it was on the market 60 or less days. So I've got to include that 60. Okay. So you could do this a couple ways, but I'm going to show you. It's different than math class, if you remember. It's less than, equal to 60. Okay. If I didn't do it this way, I would have to do less than 61 to include that 60. It doesn't really matter, end all be all. Okay. But usually this is the more correct way to go about it. All right. So that's the first criteria. But the second criteria was I didn't want to just know which ones were on the market for 60 or less days. I also wanted to know if they were on the market 60 or less days and sold for more than $200,000. So that's where the second set of criteria comes in. And notice that it is going to keep going down here. I have a handle and I can add more and more arguments if I wanted to. So my second range of criteria is going to be, remember, range is range, the sales column again, C5 to C16. And then my criteria is if I have had sales over 200, so greater than 200,000. And then if I want, I can come back up here and I can click just to get that little preview to make sure nothing is wrong. And I should have 742 as my answer. So press OK. So what I have done is I have looked for houses that were on the market 60 or less days that sold for over 200,000, or that sold for over $200,000. Then they get added together. So this one would be included, right? Because it's on the market for 60 days and it sold for over 200,000. This one was on the market for 75 days. So that one's instantly eliminated because it says less than 60. 25,000 or 25 days, 209,000. That one will be included. 39 days, that one will be included. 75, not included. 45 included, but over here you see the 189, so it wouldn't be included because the price wasn't over the amount that they were looking for. All right, so let's give this a try again. The next one is sum of properties sold within 60 days, okay, for a percentage difference less than 3%. So let's look at sum of properties sold within 60 days. That means between 0 and 60 days, right? So don't let that within 60 days, kind of confuse you. Use the internet if you're not sure about the wordage, if your boss threw something at you like this, or ask. I mean, as long as you're not asking all the time and you finally figure it out, it's okay. Sum of properties sold within 60 days for a percentage difference less than 3%. Okay, so I'm going to click on FX, and I just used it, so it's in my recent list, so I can double click on it. That's another way to go. So again, we start with the sum range. Ultimately, what are we trying to sum? The same thing. We're trying to figure out those sales, okay, that meet the two different criteria this time. And I just lost my range. Again, if you mess up, like you saw how quick it was that this will select something else, just back it all out and start again is my rule of thumb, especially when we get to a little bit more complicated things. So sum of the properties sold within 60 days for a percentage difference than 3%. So there's my sum range. I'm totaling this, okay? I generally wouldn't total the other two criteria anyway. All right, now I'm looking for the houses that sold within 60 days. Okay, so I'm back to that less than or equal to 60 days. Less than, equal to, and 60. Okay. what am I looking for? That is less than or equal to 60, this range right here. Okay, so you see how I messed up and I put range, but then as I was looking at it and I was double checking, I was like, oh, I've got it backwards. So it's got to find the range first, and then it goes and looks for the criteria. So F5 to F16 is where it will find if it's 60 days or less. Second set of criteria, okay? This is us looking to see if the difference was less than 3%, okay? So my range again is this E5 to E16, and I am looking for differences less than 3%, okay? And again, because this is set up as a percent, I have to do it as a percent since it's not set up as a decimal. Because if not, since it's formatted in that structure, it will give you a different result. All right, so I am up with 433, and that's what I have. And I come up here and I click so then I can see the answer down here, because if I'm still within it, it won't give me the answer. All right, so with this one, it had to be on the market 60 or less days and have a percentage difference of 3% or less than 3%, excuse me. So this one would count, but not over here. This one would not count. This one would count, but not over here. This one would count, and this one definitely counts. So you see the idea of that because it's less than 3%. So, all right. So that is the SUMIF function. All right, so our next if function is going to be the COUNTIF. Okay, the COUNTIF function counts the number of cells in a given range that meet specific criteria or criterion. The syntax for this one will be COUNTIF left parenthesis range criteria. So this one really is a little bit easier than the last one. Maybe they should have started with this one. The range is the range of cells to be counted by the formula. Remember, this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of thing, not a grand total. So, and it says the criteria is the condition. Condition can be any number, expression, or text entry. So we're staying in the same document here, okay? And I'm down here in H9 this time, and I am looking for the number of properties listed for 200,000 or more. So I just want to know how many houses are listed for over 200,000. That's all that's saying, okay? So, oh, real quick before I forget, they do give you a good amount of information here. Formulas, you can have 127 criteria. So when with the SUMIF function, so if I come back here and I click on this 433 and I press FX, they're talking about these arguments here. Okay, this criteria. That's 1, that's 2. I can have essentially 125 more of these if I wanted to. I've never ever, maybe the most I have ever done is 5 to 7. But yeah, somebody out there must have had this giant, workbook, and they wanted to have all those arguments in there, and so they did. Yeah, so I just don't want to forget to tell you about that 127 with the SUMIF. Okay, so count. We're going to go to the formulas bar. We're going to drop down more functions this time. And this is a statistical function. So I'm going to click on or hover over statistical, and I'm going to come down to count. And you notice there's count, count A, count blank, all the ones we've talked about already, count if and count ifs. We're on count if because we're only looking to see the properties that sold for more than 200,000. So what is our range? Again, okay, remember there's a hint down here if you need to. Our range is sales. So again, C5 to C16. Am I going to fill it? No, so I don't have to lock it in, but I could if I wanted to. And I'm just pressing F4, function F4 here to lock them in that quickly. As long as it's still blinking there, like if I had backed out, if I had selected my range and clicked down here and then came back up and pressed F4, it's only going to do the one cell near it. It has to be when you're still actively in that cell to get it to lock in everything at the same time. Okay, so the properties that sold for more than 200,000, okay, and then it's 200,000 or more, so we have to include the 200,000. So we either need to do greater than 199,999 or we need to do greater than or equal to 200,000. Again, doesn't really matter as long as you include the 200,000. So I am going to do greater than equal to 2, 2, 3. Okay, and I press OK, and I got 7. Okay, that are meeting that criteria. Okay, so let me make sure we're okay here. Excuse me. Oh, it's listed. My apologies. So regardless, I could see how many sold for over 200,000, but they're looking for listed this time. So I'm going to press FX. I'm going to realize I had done that wrong. I'm going to back it out, and I'm going to reselect listed. Again, I could lock it in if I wanted to, or I don't have to. And now I have 9. So teachable moment. How easy it is to go in and fix it if you can catch it. So, all right, next one. Number of properties that sold for more than 200,000. So this is the one I should have done this last time. So again, I can just press FX and I can come in here and I can type in count if I want to. There it is. Press OK. And again, same range, okay, that I messed up and did in the first place. This time I'm looking for the ones that sold, so C5 to C6. And again, I'm looking for greater than or equal to 200,000. Okay, and now I am going to come up here and fix this C15 to C16. So here's another way that you can do. You don't have to press FX. You can come on up to the formula bar if you want to when you're evaluating and realizing you've done something wrong. You could back it out if you wanted to, and you could delete the whole thing. I could go like this and press backspace and delete the whole thing. So there is how you can fix these if you want to, so you can end up with the correct number. As long as you, of course, can catch it when you're checking over to make sure you did it correct, that you have the right number. Because you saw in the last one, I got the wrong, and even in this one, I got answers, but they were the wrong answers. And if I hadn't double checked myself, I would have an answer, but it'd be the wrong answer. All right, so the next one that we're going to do is the count ifs. So this means multiple criteria. Again, we can have up to 170 sets of criteria if we wanted to, and it would still calculate for us. All right, so coming back here, this time I'm looking for the number of properties listed 60 days or more and listed price reduced by 5% or more. Okay, so I'm looking for 60 days or more and a difference of 5% or more. So that's the multiple criteria. So I can come up here and click on Insert FX. I can type in count ifs. I could also go to more and statistical if I wanted to. I'm going to press OK. All right, so my criteria range, what am I looking for? Just like with the sum ifs, it starts with the criteria range. Okay, I am looking for the number of properties listed 60 days or more and price reduced by 5% or more. So the first range here is 60 days or more. So that's F5 to F16. What am I looking for? I am looking for that greater than or equal to 60. Okay, greater than or equal to 60 days on the market. I've got to include the 60. So if I don't do it this way, I've got to do greater than 59. All right, the second thing that has to meet the requirement to get counted is the 5%. Okay, so my second requirement is E5 to E16. Okay, and then I am going to do, it's got to be 5% or more. So I've got to include that 5%. So I have to do, and the problem is that these are not whole numbers. So I can't just simply do greater than 4 I would have to do greater than 4.9 in this case. And then if I change the decimals, it gets a little more complicated. So this is a prime example to why you really should use the greater than or and equal to, just in case you changed formatting or something. So greater than or equal to 5% is the second criteria. So it is only going to count the ones that meet both of these criteria. And I'm going to press OK. And I get the answer of 2. Okay. And so if I go and I look, it had to be on the market for 60 days or more and be reduced by 5% or more. And here's this one. So if I didn't put that greater than or equal to 60 in there, and I put greater than and equal to 60, it would not have included this first one. Okay, so this one doesn't because it's not more than 5%. So essentially I'm looking for anything for more than 5% here and more than 60 days. Okay, so more than 5%, not 60 days. Okay, so this is your other one here. Okay, so that's where they're getting to from. This was an easy one for me to check and show and tell you how it's working. All right, so a cell in a range you identify and in the function arguments dialog box is counted only if all the corresponding criteria you specified are true for that cell. If the criterion refers to an empty, COUNTIF treats it as a 0 value. Just a little FYI there. All right, so the last one that we're going to look at in this video segment is average if. The average if function returns the mathematical mean of the cells in a range that meet the criteria. Your structure for this one or your syntax is average if, range, criteria, and average range. So it's very similar to a sum if. If the average if syntax is the same as the range, just like with the sum if, you don't have to duplicate it and put it in there twice. Okay, is what they're saying in this one. Okay. So we are looking for the average list price. List price. Let's let me not mess this up this time. Okay. So if I come up here and I'm in my cell ready to go and I go to more functions, this is under statistical as well. And then I see average here. And then I am going to see I have average A, average if, average ifs. Okay. So the average list price is what they want. So all they're really looking for in this first one is an average. It's not even average based on any kind of condition. Okay, so we're going back and we're reviewing here. So I'm going to click on average and I'm going to go, remember, just pick the list price range. And if I was filling this in, I would have to lock it in, but I'm not, so I don't have to. And I end up with an average list price of $232,792. Okay, so that is my average list price. And I did pick list this time. Okay, so the next one is average days on the market for properties listed over 200,000. So the other one was just an average, okay, a mean. This one's going to find the average if it's listed for over 200,000. Okay, it'll give us a basis of comparison too. So again, I can go to statistical if I want and pick average if. All right, what's my range? Okay, remember, range and average range can be the same thing if need be. So I am looking for the list price again, and I want my list price, if I'm over here, to be over 200,000. Okay, so I am going to type in greater than 200,000. And my range, average range, the range that I'm trying to find the average for is the same. So I can put it in there or I don't have to put it in there. Okay. Sorry, y'all. I'm just comparing and contrasting my directions. All right, so I'm gonna press OK. So I'm going to show you why this one is not right, okay? So if you read this too quickly, average days on the market for properties listed over 200,000, okay? So I have an answer. It's the wrong answer, okay? So if I go back here, I could do this if I wanted to. I could show you the difference. Okay. Oops. Just so I can have a teachable moment. We found the average list price over 200,000. Okay. So what this one did is it found the list price if it was over 200,000 and then averaged it together. So that's why these two answers are different. So that's what I was trying to show you. Okay. And so our range and our sum range were the same because of that. All right. So now average days on the market property listed over 200,000. Okay. Now this one is going to be based on it being, first it has to be over 200,000. Okay. And based on, and then it's not based on so much the sales anymore as they want to figure out how many days on the market it was. So let me reverse this wording for you. We are going to look and see for prices over 200,000, okay? And we are going to then once we find them over 200,000, we're going to figure out on average those that are over 200,000 how long they've been on the market. So this is going to be a number of days thing. Okay. So I'm going to press FX. I'm going to do sum ifs and I'm going to press OK. So my sum range in this one is going to be the B5. Okay, I typed in sum. Y'all, I'm falling apart. It's average, sorry. Yes. Okay. So my average range, okay, when I'm averaging together is the list price, because it's listed over, not the sales. Okay. And then hold on one second. Yeah, I did that right. Okay. So I am going to select that B5 to B16. And my criteria that I'm looking for the B5 to B16 is as if it's greater than 200,000. And then that's my criteria. Okay, so I'm going to put that in criteria where it should be. And now I am looking for the second set of criteria range is the days. And I am looking for just how long it's been on the market for 60 days.